Now, this welfare reform bill, well, it's kind of gone, hasn't it? It has been reformed itself to the point that it doesn't even seem to exist anymore, as Sir Keir Starmer's caved in to rebels when it comes to how to reduce the cost of benefits to the nation. It seems to be dead in the water. How is it looking? Was it a good idea? Should it be reinstated? Let's get all those questions answered by Matthew Lesh, Director of Public Policy at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Hello there, Matthew. Do you have a hangover this morning by any chance?
A little bit rusty. What about you?
Yeah, no, thank you for the gin and tonics. I had a very lovely time and some delicious little canapes floating about as well. Right, let's talk about welfare reform, because I get the impression that those of us on the sort of right-wing side of things would probably happily see this bill pass. It was a step in the right direction, some might say. Or was it? Were they actually looking to take money from the wrong places, targeting the wrong people who actually need our support? And what are we left with now?
Yeah, look, I think this is always difficult when it comes to this is always difficult when it comes to welfare reforms, which is you will have a series of people who are getting some kind of benefit from the government, and they do feel a sense of loss and grievance when it comes to it. But there's also an underlying problem here the government's trying to solve, which is that without reform, the cost of welfare to kind of people over working age is expected to double in just a decade, from around 36 billion to 66 billion. Now, what the government was trying to do would save about 4.5 billion over 5 years by making some changes to the eligibility system for PIPs, for personal independent support payments. It was undoubtedly a step in the right direction. It wasn't going to be the ultimate saviour of our fiscal situation, as you can see by those numbers. There's some interesting research suggesting that, in fact, basically more or less the amount of people who get these disability benefits, you get some kind of level of health support from the government, those in work, is not really about the underlying level of sickness in the population, which has remained pretty stable, but it's more about the generosity of the system. And the rising level of incapacity benefit spending does not actually mean that there's more people who are ill, but rather kind of a more generous welfare system underlying it. So the government, I think, was right to try to step in the direction of reform, even if it was difficult and even if you might necessarily have an imperfect system. The fact that they've had to reverse on it, I think, is quite big political news. We should think of this as the third U-turn in just a month after the winter fuel payment reversal and the grooming, gang inquiry reversals. It really does feel like the authority is stepping away a bit from the government here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I've heard it said that MPs looked at their inboxes, people concerned about having their PIP payments reduced, did some maths and went, right, this many people in my constituency are on those PIP payments who aren't going to vote for me next time round if I support this bill. And actually, this is my majority. And that sort of led to a lot of this rebellion. But we can't have a government like that. I mean, that just doesn't work. If every single MP is so concerned about preserving their own job that no one can actually take decisive action on what is important for the country. When we have got so much debt, when the interest on our debt on a monthly basis actually outstrips that money that we're spending on defence. I mean, this is not a sustainable position to be in. Politically, one argues, therefore, that Starmer was doing the right thing. Do you think this spells the beginning of an end? If he can't get something like this through with 4 years to go, what hope does he stand of actually being able to do anything other than trot around the world, glad-handing other world leaders, being, Sir Keir never here?
Yeah, look, I think this is very similar, actually, to what the Tories did for the last 15 years of the time they spent in government, which is they try to do some kind of relatively minor reform. There'd be outrage on the backbench, and then they wouldn't really be able to achieve very much in the longer run. They might have felt a small political win by not doing some kind of difficult reform. But again, if you don't fix the country's underlying problems, the fact that, as you've said, our debt is almost 100% of GDP. We've got about as much debt as the size of our economy, with huge and quite sustainably high levels of interest repayments on that. And people are ultimately going to pay the price for that if you can't fix what's going on here. And that's what the government, I suppose, admirably was trying to do. And they really failed to make the moral case here. The moral case here is that it's not just about the fiscal side, of course, about the fact that you do not want to see people languishing on welfare. It's unfair to them. You encourage people not to work, and that you only get these kind of payments if you make a claim that you can't work. So you kind of stuck in this kind of relatively low level of quality of life as a result, rather than encouraging as many people as possible back to work through the welfare system, which was, of course, originally the point of a lot of the previous government's universal credit reforms. I think that there's also something else interesting going on here, which is at the micro level, it might make sense to say, oh, yes, you should get back your welfare payment. But at the macro level, actually, there's been a big shift in public opinion. We saw some recent polling from Freshwater, who I'm associated with, for City AM, showing that a majority would now prefer tax cuts, even if it means less government spending. That's, again, a reversal from the last Tory government. And it says that the public mood is actually shifting in, I suppose, a more fiscally conservative direction. But the government's going in the opposite way. And then there's going to be some implications here for, well, how's the government's going to pay for all these policy reversals? Are we going to be seeing higher taxes in the budget in order to be able to afford this kind of largesse? And I don't think the public in the long run is going to be particularly happy with the fact that they're going to be taxed at higher levels. So it's a real kind of short-termist thinking rather than what's actually going to leave the country in a better position and then what's actually going to win politically in the long run.
Yeah, I think we're in a pretty difficult situation. I have a feeling Rachel Reeves is not going to have good news for us come September. Matthew Lesh, thank you ever so much for unpacking all of that, both the economics and the politics of it.